I recently faced my own worst nightmare. The HOA president tried to commandeer my mountain cabin in the middle of a blizzard with me and my dog still inside. And her excuse? She called it a community emergency. Funny thing is, the only emergency that day was her lies being picked apart by the cops. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Ethan Hayes, and this story is about how far a man will go to defend his home. It started late, as these things often do. The wind was already starting to howl down from the high peaks, a sure sign the blizzard the weatherman promised was the real deal. My husky, Cody, was asleep by the wood stove, his big paws twitching. He was probably dreaming about chasing a squirrel or, more likely, catching a perfectly thrown football. The log cabin was warm, quiet. It was my slice of peace on earth, perched on Black Pine Ridge, high above the manicured lawns and matching mailboxes of the Black Pine Estates Homeowners Association, a place I specifically bought because it was not part of their little kingdom. I thought that was clear. The county property map was clear. The deed was clear. But for some people, clarity is just a suggestion. The knock on the door wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, frantic pounding, the kind that says something is on fire or someone is being chased. Cody shot up from a dead sleep, a low, rumbling growl starting deep in his chest. I put a hand on his thick fur. Easy, bud. The clock on the mantel read 12:07 a.m. Nobody comes calling at this hour, in this weather, unless it's an emergency. I flipped on the porch light and looked through the peephole. What I saw wasn't an emergency. It was an entitlement complex wrapped in a parka. Sharon Vance, president of the HOA down in the valley, stood on my porch, and she did not look happy. I don't think I'd ever seen her look happy, but this was a special level of sour. Her face was pinched, her eyes narrow. I unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the chain on. I opened the door a few inches. The blast of cold air smelled like pine and snow. Cody pushed his nose into the gap, the growl getting louder. I just stared at her. My brain was still trying to catch up. Was I dreaming? Maybe I'd eaten some bad jerky. I'm sorry, I said, my voice flat. I think the altitude is getting to you. What did you just say? She huffed, a plume of white steam erupting from her mouth. Don't play dumb with me. There's a state of emergency. The roads are going to be closed. My cousins are stuck. Their rental down in the valley fell through. They have nowhere to go. She gestured behind her with a thumb. I could just make out a minivan parked at the edge of my driveway, its engine running, headlights cutting through the first few flurries of snow. So, I said, drawing the word out. That sounds like a problem for them. Cody punctuated my sentence with a sharp bark. Sharon's eyes flashed. This is a community, Ethan. We help each other. I've declared all available properties are to be used for emergency shelter. I almost laughed. Almost. Sharon, we've been over this. I am not in your community. My property line ends 100 yards before your HOA even begins. You have zero jurisdiction up here. Zero. She took a step closer, her face getting red. This is not a time for legal nonsense. It's about decency, about humanitarian kindness. They have a child with them. I glanced past her at the van. I didn't see any child, but it was dark. It didn't matter. My grandpa built this cabin. He taught me to be self-reliant, to be prepared, and to never, ever let a bully push you off your own land. This wasn't just wood and nails she was trying to claim. It was his memory. My answer is no, I said, my voice quiet but firm. They can go to a hotel. They can go to the emergency shelter the county set up at the high school. They are not staying here. Cody seemed to agree, letting out another bark that echoed in the quiet forest. This is my house, not a public inn. Sharon's face twisted into a mask of pure fury. She looked from me to Cody, who was now showing a little bit of teeth. You are a selfish, antisocial man, Ethan Hayes. And that dog is a menace. He's a great judge of character. I shot back. The sarcasm was lost on her. She pointed a gloved finger at me, the tip shaking with rage. You will regret this, she hissed. When this storm is over, you're going to find out what it really means to be part of a community, one way or another. She spun around and stomped back to her car, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. I watched until her tail lights disappeared down the winding drive. I closed the door, slid the chain off, and relocked the deadbolt. Cody looked up at me, whining softly. I know, buddy, I said, scratching him behind the ears. She's something else. I walked to the window and looked out into the darkness. The snow was falling harder now, thick white flakes swirling in the beam of the porch light. Her threat hung in the air, colder than the wind. I knew this wasn't over. People like Sharon Vance don't just walk away. They escalate. And as the first real waves of the blizzard began to lash the cabin, I realized she had just declared war. As her tail lights vanished, she was already dialing. Minutes after my refusal, she called the sheriff with a nuisance. Then 911 with a fake emergency. The only question left was her next move. As I killed the porch light, the minivan didn't leave. It idled at the curve where my drive meets the county road, brake lights glowing like two angry eyes. A figure in a hood stepped out, phone up, filming my cabin through the trees. Cody's hackles lifted. I stepped onto the porch again and swept the floodlight across the snow. The beam hit the figure, and they flinched, half slipping on the iced gravel. "Hey," the person called, voice thin in the wind. She said, "This is the community shelter now. You were lied to." I said, "Private road, private house." I called back. "Film from the county shoulder if you feel like testifying later." The figure hesitated, then lifted a laminated sign from under their coat and hustled toward my mailbox post. Big blue letters, "Emergency Shelter, Black Pine Estates." They started to zip tie it on like they owned the place. "Don't," I said. It came out low and even, the kind of voice that makes men stop without knowing why. Cody's growl filled the quiet between snow gusts. The hooded figure froze, eyes cutting from me to Cody and back. "Sorry, man," she said. "Look, I don't want trouble." "Then don't make any," I said. "Best move. Back in the van. Tell her my no doesn't melt." They backed away, breathing hard. The sign disappeared under their coat. The van crept off, tail lights swallowed by the storm. When the night went still again, I walked out to the post and found they had taped a second copy to the far side. Slick move. I peeled it off, folded it, and fed it to the stove. Paper curled, flame took it, and the cabin went quiet except for the snap of sap and Cody's steady breath. War, I thought, and locked the door a second time. I was up before the sun, not that you could tell. The world outside my window was a churning mess of white and gray. The blizzard had arrived in full force. I had a pot of coffee brewing, the smell cutting through the scent of pine from the wood stove. Cody was pacing, restless. He could feel it, too. The fight wasn't over. I checked my email, and there it was. Sharon hadn't wasted any time. A message sent at 3:15 a.m. to the entire Black Pine Estates HOA mailing list. The subject line was, "Community Safety Alert. Uncooperative neighbor on Black Pine Ridge." My hands tightened on my coffee mug as I read. She painted me as a paranoid, unstable recluse who had aggressively refused to provide humanitarian aid during a declared state of emergency. She mentioned my large, uncontrolled animal and implied my property was a safety hazard. It was a masterpiece of smear tactics, all couched in the language of neighborly concern. I was still seething when I heard the rumble. It was faint at first, then grew louder, a low, grinding sound that didn't belong on my mountain. I went to the window. Through the blowing snow, I saw them. A convoy of 3 SUVs, all with snow tires, crawling up my long, unplowed driveway. The lead vehicle was Sharon's. This was her safety and aesthetics committee. It was a joke. They were her hand-picked cronies, people who enjoyed the little bit of power she gave them. They couldn't plow the last 50 yards of my drive, so they parked in a line, blocking the only way in or out. Doors opened and 4 figures in expensive winter gear got out, Sharon at the lead. She was holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. I pulled on my boots and my red parka and went out to meet them on the porch. Cody stood beside me, a low growl his only greeting. "Morning, Sharon," I said, my voice calm. "Decided to go for a winter hike." She ignored the sarcasm. "Ethan, this is an official HOA inspection," she announced, her voice carrying over the wind. "We have received numerous complaints regarding potential safety violations on this property. We need to inspect for compliance with community standards." I leaned against the porch railing and crossed my arms. "Sharon, you're a broken record, and a bad one at that. Let me say this slowly so you can all understand. My property is not in your HOA." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was a copy of the county plat map with my parcel highlighted in yellow and the boundary of the Black Pine Estates HOA outlined in red. "This map, which is a legal document, says you have no authority here. None. So, you and your committee can turn your vehicles around and inspect your own mailboxes." Sharon stepped onto the first stair like she was mounting a stage, clipboard up, voice bright. "I am serving notice of inspection for life safety violations. Failure to comply will result in fines." "No," I said. She tried to pin a plastic sleeve to my post with a strip of blue painter's tape. Cody slid one paw forward, silent. I touched his shoulder. The big man from the storm muttered, "Just let us look around, Hayes." 5 minutes. We'll be out of your hair. He put one boot on the bottom step. That's your second trespass, I said. I don't want your money, your committee, or your problems. And you won't like your third. A gust hit the porch hard enough to rattle the eaves and tear the clipboard from Sharon's hands. Papers fanned across the snow like albino leaves. The big man lunged after them, foot skidding on the ice tread. He windmilled, grabbing for the rail and catching air. I caught his sleeve. For a breath, we both hung there, him pitched forward, me braced in the doorway, wood biting my palm. I hauled him back up onto the tread, and he stared at me, shame fighting with anger. You're welcome, I said. Now get off my steps. Sharon's mouth was a flat, bloodless line. You've assaulted him. You watch me keep him from eating the stairs, I said. There's a difference. She jabbed a finger at the nearest SUV. Launch the drone, she said. Get roof shots, ice load, missing ice guards, whatever we can sight. You launch anything over my land, and it's coming down in a hefty bag, I said. Last time, off my property, for a long beat, only the wind answered. Then she hissed to her crew, gather it up. We'll do this by the book. She wasn't retreating, she was reloading. One of the men, a guy I recognized from the general store, puffed out his chest. Now see here, the rules are for everyone's safety. I cut him off. The law is for everyone's safety, and the law says you were trespassing. I pointed down the driveway. Get off my land. For a long moment, nobody moved. It was a standoff. 4 of them, one of me, and a very large, very unhappy dog. The wind howled around us, whipping snow into our faces. Sharon stared at me, her eyes burning with frustration. She had expected me to fold. She thought a little public shaming and a show of force would be enough. My grandpa taught me something else. You never give a bully an inch, because they'll take a mile. Finally, she broke. This isn't over, she muttered, more to herself than to me. She motioned for her group to get back in their vehicles. They turned and trudged back through the snow, defeated for now. I watched them execute a clumsy 3-point turn and head back down the mountain. I went back inside, the cold air clinging to me. Cody shook the snow from his fur, sending a spray across the floor. This was an escalation. The emails were one thing, a war of words. Showing up in a convoy, trying to force their way onto my property, that was something else entirely. She was testing me, pushing the boundaries to see how I'd react. She thought this was just about her cousins needing a place to stay. I knew it was about control. She wanted my property, my compliance. She wanted to absorb my quiet refuge into her little suburban fiefdom. And I knew, as I watched the last of their tire tracks disappear under the falling snow, that she wasn't going to stop until a real authority one with a badge made her. It was time to stop just reacting. It was time to prepare for the next assault. I dragged a milk crate of old camp odds and ends from the mudroom and went to work. A spool of baling wire, 3 pie tins, a bag of rusty nails Grandpa grade tech. I strung a clatter line at knee height across the bend in the driveway where engines downshift. Nothing fancy. Wire to a fur trunk, tins on the line, a handful of nails in each. Anyone nosing up after dark would kick it and set off a racket you could hear in the next county. Power flickered. Lights strobed twice and died. The stove kept its orange glow, but the outlets went quiet. I grabbed a headlamp and pushed into the storm for the generator lean-to. Snow hammered my hood like rice on a tin roof. Halfway there, Cody froze, nose high, then bounded toward the propane tank, barking short and sharp. Easy, easy, I said, planting a hand in his ruff. His muzzle pointed at the drift by the regulator. There, under an inch of fresh snow, a set of prints. Not boot styers. A hand-pulled sled track had cut a neat track, crossed my buried side yard, and stopped at the tank. Close enough to read the gauge. Close enough to close a valve if you were mean and stupid. I brushed the drift and found a ribbon of orange survey flagging tied on a low branch. A marker for later. I tore it free and jammed it in my pocket. The generator barked to life on the second pull, settling into a throaty hum. Lights ticked back on inside. The cabin blinked awake, stubborn and warm. The CB crackled, a voice I didn't know, too steady to be a kid, too smug to be a pro. Estates patrol to Ridge House. Clear the lane for emergency equipment. Repeat, clear the lane. You're on a public channel, I said into the handset. Identify yourself and your agency. Silence. Then a new voice, strained through a cloth. Community safety team. We need ingress for welfare. Failure to comply will be noted. Record running, I said. State your badge number. The carrier dropped so fast it squealed. I set the handset down and looked at Cody. We're not alone, buddy. But we already knew that. I took 2 more pie tins, hung them off the back deck like wind chimes, and dusted the porch steps with a light shake of blue carpenter's chalk. If anyone made a move on the door in the dark, they'd go home wearing my fingerprints on their cuffs. The convoy was gone, but the quiet that followed felt heavy. It was the calm in the eye of the storm, and I knew it wouldn't last. Sharon wasn't the type to accept defeat. She'd just changed tactics. She couldn't bully me, so she would try to use the law against me. I spent the next hour making more coffee and running through scenarios in my head. My time as a volunteer with the Wildland Fire crew taught me to think ahead, to anticipate how a situation could spread. Sharon was like a wildfire of entitlement, and I needed to build a firebreak. My ally, my neighbor Ben from the next ridge over, crackled to life over the old CB radio I kept for emergencies. His voice was a welcome dose of sanity. Breaker 19, Black Pine, you got your ears on, Ethan? I picked up the handset. Loud and clear, Ben. What's the word? The word is Sharon Vance has been burning up the phone lines down here, he said. Heard she's telling folks you're running some kind of off-grid fortress up there, making threats. Figured you'd want a heads up. Appreciate it, Ben, I said. She already paid me a visit with her goon squad this morning. Yeah, I saw them head up your way. Bunch of wannabe deputies. You hold the line. The line is holding, I confirmed. Good man. Keep your powder dry. This blizzard's the real deal. Nobody's getting in or out for a day or two once she really sets in. Over. He was right. The isolation was both a blessing and a curse. It would keep Sharon's committee away, but it would also make getting help harder if I needed it. Not long after, I saw the flashing lights, red and blue, painting the trees and the falling snow in pulses of color. A single sheriff's department SUV was carefully making its way up my driveway. Snow glare turned the pines a flat, gray-white. This was it, the next phase. I told Cody to stay, then shrugged into my red parka and stepped onto the porch again. 2 deputies got out. One was older with tired eyes and a thick mustache. His name tag read Serrano. The other was younger with a stiff posture and a by-the-book look on his face. His tag said Dawson. Ethan Hayes. Sergeant Serrano asked, his voice calm and professional. That's me, I said. Something I can help you with, Sergeant? Deputy Dawson spoke up, his tone accusatory. Sir, we've received a complaint from the HOA president, a Sharon Vance. She's alleged that you're creating a public nuisance, harboring a dangerous animal, and making verbal threats. My jaw tightened. She's lying, I said simply. She's angry because I wouldn't let her and her family use my private home as a free hotel during the storm. My dog is on my property, and the only threats made were by her, to me. Serrano looked from me to the cabin, then back. He seemed to be taking it all in, not just the words, but the context. Dawson, on the other hand, was focused on his notepad. Ms. Vance also stated you have unpermitted structures and are in violation of community covenants. Dawson pressed. I held up my hand. Hold on. Before we go any further, let me be perfectly clear. Sergeant, Deputy, you are standing on private land that is not, and has never been, part of the Black Pine Estates HOA. I went inside for a moment and came back with the plat map and a copy of my deed. I handed them to Serrano. He took them, his gloves creaking in the cold, and looked them over carefully. He looked at the map, then looked down my driveway toward the valley. He nodded slowly. Looks like you're right, Mr. Hayes. Your parcel is outside their recorded boundary. Deputy Dawson looked annoyed. Sir, with all due respect, she claims there's a verbal agreement. There is no agreement, I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. There is only a woman who is used to getting her own way and who is now abusing the 911 system because she didn't get it from me. You are the third group of people she has sent to my home today to harass me. The first 2 were her friends. Now it's you. Serrano handed the papers back to me. He looked me in the eye. Do you have any weapons in the house, Mr. Hayes? I have a hunting rifle locked in a safe, completely legal, and a wood axe by the stove, I said. This is a log cabin on a mountain. That's standard equipment. Serrano nodded again. Okay, look, we had to respond to the call. From what I can see here, this is a civil dispute, a disagreement between neighbors. She's not my neighbor, I corrected him gently. She lives a mile down that road in a different world. He gave a small, weary smile. Fair enough. For now, there's no crime being committed here. We'll go have another talk with Ms. Vance. Try to stay warm. It's going to get rough. They turned to leave. Then the whiteout sealed the ridge. Deputy Dawson still looked unconvinced, like he was certain I was hiding something. Serrano, though, seemed to understand the situation for what it was, a vindictive woman weaponizing her authority. As they got back in their SUV and carefully backed down the drive, I noticed something else. A dark sedan parked on the road at the very bottom of my property line, almost hidden by the trees. It pulled away the moment the sheriff's vehicle was gone. It was one of Sharon's people. They weren't just calling the cops. They were watching me. The harassment was getting more organized. It was time for me to get organized, too. Watching the sheriff's SUV disappear, followed by that shadowy sedan, a cold resolve settled over me. This was no longer just about saying no. This was about defense. Sharon was moving from simple bullying to a campaign of psychological warfare. If she was going to treat my home like a castle under siege, then I was going to fortify it. My grandpa didn't build this place to be surrendered to the first petty tyrant with a clipboard. He taught me to be resourceful, to use what I had. And I had skills from my years as a wildland fire volunteer, skills in observation, preparation, and setting up remote monitoring. It was time to put them to use. My first stop was the old footlocker in the attic. It was filled with my gear from the Forest Service. I pulled out 3 motion-activated trail cameras. They were weatherproof, had night vision, and the batteries were still good. I spent the next hour working in the biting wind and swirling snow, my fingers growing numb despite my gloves. I placed the first camera high up on a thick pine tree, aimed directly at the front door and the porch. It was shielded by the branches, nearly invisible from the ground. The second one went on the back of the house, covering the rear entrance and the 2 downstairs windows. The third, and most important, I positioned halfway down my driveway, concealed in a dense cluster of aspen. It had a perfect view of the entrance to my property. Anyone who drove up or walked up would be captured on video long before they ever reached the cabin. Each camera fed wirelessly to a small receiver connected to my tablet. I could now watch every approach to my home in real time from the warmth of the living room. Next, I addressed the information war. Sharon was spreading lies through emails and phone calls. I couldn't stop that, but I could prepare to counter it with undeniable truth. I found the file with all my property documents, the deed, the original survey, the county tax records, and the official plat map. I scanned them all into my computer, creating a digital folder labeled proof. If she was going to fight with paper, I was going to fight with legally binding, government-stamped paper. But technology was only part of the solution. My grandpa believed in simple, effective, low-tech warnings. He used to set them up around his hunting camps to keep bears away from the supplies. I decided to make my own. I took one of Cody's old collars, the one with 3 little brass bells on it, and tied it to a length of high-test fishing line. I ran the line from the doorknob of the back door, around a hook I screwed into the wall, and then out through a tiny hole I drilled in the window frame. Outside, I strung it low to the ground, about ankle high, across the path leading from the woods to my back porch. It was a trip line. It wouldn't hurt anyone, but if someone tried to sneak up to the house in the dark, the slightest touch on that invisible line would jingle the bells inside. A simple, silent alarm only I and Cody would hear. Cody watched my every move, his head cocked with curiosity. He seemed to understand that we were shoring up our defenses. He took up a new post, lying not by the fire, but on the rug by the front door, facing it, a furry, 4-legged sentinel. The psychological side of this fight was just as important. Down in the valley, Sharon was painting me as the villain. I saw her flyers tacked to the community message board when I went for supplies last week. Know your neighbors. Report suspicious activity, with a picture of a hooded, shadowy figure that was supposed to be me. Cars had been driving by my road end more frequently, slowing down as they passed. It was intimidation, pure and simple. They wanted me to feel isolated, watched, and pressured. But my grandpa always said, solitude is only scary if you're not prepared for it. And I was prepared. The cameras were my eyes. The documents were my shield. The bell collar alarm was my early warning system. Cody was my guard. I sat back in my armchair, the tablet on the table next to me, showing 3 still, snowy images of my property. I had done everything I could. I had built my fire break. Now all I could do was wait. The trap was set. Sooner or later, I knew the rats would come sniffing around. At 2:58, the bell gave a shy little tick, like a spoon on china. Cody's head came up. My heart tried to leave without me. I grabbed the headlamp and eased the back door open an inch. The storm pressed its mouth to the gap and breathed ice inside. I killed the interior lights and let the world go to silhouettes. The clatter line held. No tins sang. I swept the beam low across the yard, and the forest answered in moving white. For a second, I saw a shape in the snow, 2 quick bounds, a twist of ears, and gone. Mule deer, a yearling spooked by the moan of the ridge. False positive, I whispered. Cody's tail thumped once, skeptical. We stepped out anyway because it's the step you take that keeps you alive. The beam found a fresh crack in the fur above the porch. I slowed, split, ready to drop. I braced the ladder, pushed the limb off with the roof rake, and it crashed into the drift with a sound like a door slamming. Better now than on my shingles at 4 a.m. Back inside, I set water on for tea and checked the feeds again. Snow, snow, and more snow. 3 blank televisions, tuned to winter. Cody curled at the door, nose pointed at the dark like a compass needle. I sat with my back to the stove, head on the logs, and let my eyes close for 10 minutes. That's when 4:12 came, and the bell didn't tick shyly. It sang. The deep silence of a blizzard is a strange thing. The thick snow swallows sound, wrapping the world in a blanket of quiet. But inside that quiet, you hear everything. The creak of the logs as the cabin settles, the hiss of the wood in the stove, the soft sigh of your dog sleeping at your feet. It was that silence that was broken at 4:12 in the morning. I wasn't asleep. I was dozing in my armchair, the storm too wild to allow for real rest. What woke me wasn't a loud noise. It was a change in Cody. He lifted his head. His ears perked forward. A low, almost silent growl rumbled in his chest. His eyes were locked on the back of the house. A second later, I heard it. A tiny metallic jingle-jingle. My heart jumped. The bell collar. The trip line. My hand shot out and grabbed the tablet from the side table. My thumb swiped the screen awake, pulling up the live feed from the trail cams. The front of the house was empty, just a sea of blowing snow. The driveway camera was the same. I switched to the back camera, and there they were. 2 figures dressed head to toe in dark clothing, hoods pulled up, faces obscured by the shadows and the swirling flakes. They had come from the woods, just as I suspected they might. One was standing watch, nervously scanning the treeling. The other was crouched down by the kitchen window, the very one I had drilled the small hole next. He had something in his hand, a small, flat piece of metal. A pry bar. My blood ran cold, then hot with anger. This was it. This was the escalation I knew was coming. They weren't just trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to break into my home. My training kicked in. Stay calm. Observe. Document. I tapped the record button on the camera feed, a red dot appearing in the corner of the screen. Every move they made was now being saved. The figure at the window inserted the pry bar into the frame and started to push. The old wood groaned in protest. I needed to act, but I couldn't just run out there. It was 2 against 1 in the dark, in a blizzard. That was a fool's game. I needed a better weapon. I picked up my cell phone. My fingers were shaking slightly as I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I kept my voice as low and steady as I could, my eyes glued to the tablet screen. I need to report a breaking and entering in progress, I whispered. My address is 14 Black Pine Ridge. There are 2 individuals, male, I think, trying to pry open my back window right now. They are being recorded on my security camera. I gave her the description: dark hoodies, dark pants. The man at the window was getting more aggressive, putting his weight into the pry bar. The glass shuddered. Are you in a safe location, sir? The dispatcher asked, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos. I am, I said, but they are about to get in. As I spoke, the figure standing watch suddenly tensed up. He must have heard the faint murmur of my voice. He grabbed his partner's shoulder. On the screen, I saw his head whip around, trying to pinpoint the sound. The man with the pry bar froze. They both stared at the house for a long, terrifying moment. Then panic set in. They dropped the tool, turned, and scrambled back the way they came, disappearing into the dark woods like ghosts. Just as they vanished, the pry bar wielder stumbled. His hood fell back for just a second, and he glanced back toward the camera. Click. The camera's infrared flash was invisible to the naked eye, but it captured a perfect, crystal-clear image of his face. It was a young man, maybe early 20s, and I recognized him. It was Sharon's nephew, the one she always had doing her yard work. And the other, slightly older man? I was sure it was the cousin she'd wanted to house. Sir, are you there? The suspects have fled. The dispatcher's voice crackled in my ear. Yes. I breathed, a wave of relief washing over me. Yes, they're gone. They ran into the woods. She told me they would dispatch a car, but the roads were treacherous. It could be a while. I understood. I ended the call and saved the video file, labeling it Attempted BNE 4:12 a.m. I had them. I had clear, undeniable proof of a crime. Within the hour, Her story mutated from charity to break into a welfare check with a phantom child. Not a civil dispute, not a nuisance complaint attempted burglary. The footage was my silver bullet. But as the adrenaline faded, a new, colder thought crept in. Sharon had sent her own family to break into my house. When she found out they had failed, and that I had them on camera, what would she do? A cornered animal is the most dangerous. And I had just pushed Sharon Vance, a woman who already believed she was above the law, right into a corner. The blizzard was at its peak. The deputies were struggling to get up the mountain. I was alone with proof that could ruin her. And I had a terrible feeling that her next move would be even more desperate and even more dangerous. The hours after the break-in attempt were the longest of my life. The blizzard had become a full-on whiteout. The world outside my windows was gone, replaced by a solid, moving wall of snow. The wind screamed like a banshee, rattling the shutters and testing the seals on the old window panes. It was impossible to see more than 5 feet from the cabin. The deputies never made it up the ridge. Dispatch called back around dawn to say the road up the ridge was officially impassable, even for their 4x4. They had to turn back. I was completely cut off. Me, Cody, and the video evidence on my tablet. For a while, there was nothing, just the storm. I made breakfast, fed Cody, and kept the fire stoked. I watched the camera feeds, but they showed nothing but a swirling vortex of white. The quiet was unnerving. Sharon knew her thugs had failed. She had to know I'd called the sheriff. The silence was her thinking, her plotting her next move. The phone rang just before noon. The caller ID said Sheriff's Department. I answered immediately. It was Sergeant Serrano. His voice sounded tired, strained. "Mr. Hayes, it's Sergeant Serrano. We need to talk." "I'm here, Sergeant," I said. "I assume you have my report about the 2 men who tried to break into my house this morning?" "I do," he said, and then he paused. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "But that's not why I'm calling. We've just received another call from Sharon Vance." I gripped the phone tighter. "And what fresh lie is she telling now?" Serrano sighed, a sound heavy with frustration. "It's a bad one, Mr. Hayes. She's claiming you're having some kind of breakdown. She says she saw smoke pouring from your chimney earlier, and then it stopped, and she's worried your heat has gone out, and you'll freeze to death." I glanced at the wood stove. It was blazing hot, the chimney drawing perfectly. "She's a liar, Sergeant. The fire's been going all night. I've got enough wood in here to last a week." "I figured as much," Serrano said. "But it gets worse. She's now claiming you have a child in there with you." My blood went ice cold. "Eh, what?" "She's telling the dispatcher you have a young nephew staying with you, that he's at risk due to your unstable behavior and the failing heat. She's demanding we perform an emergency welfare check, citing the child endangerment statutes." I was speechless. It was the most disgusting, manipulative lie I could have imagined. She had invented a phantom child and put him in danger, all to create a legal pretext to get inside my house. She knew a simple welfare check on an adult could probably wait until the storm passed, but a child at risk? That was a 5-alarm fire for law enforcement. They had to act. "Sergeant, there is no child here," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "It's just me and my dog. This is a fabrication, a desperate, malicious lie to get you to break down my door, because her family failed to do it for her this morning." "I believe you, Mr. Hayes," Serrano said, and I was surprised to find that he sounded like he actually did. "The story has changed 3 times in the last 12 hours. It smells all wrong. But the problem is, I don't have a choice. A credible report of a child at risk during a state of emergency. My hands are tied. I have to send a team. I have to lay eyes on the situation." I looked out the window into the white void. "How?" I asked. "Your own people said the road was impassable." "She thought of that," he said grimly. "She's volunteered her own resources. She's got a truck with a snowplow attachment and a man who knows how to use it. They're going to clear a path for my deputies. They're probably on their way up your road right now." I felt a surge of helpless anger. She was using the storm itself as her weapon. She was plowing the road for the very people she was manipulating, all to get to me. She was creating the emergency and providing the solution. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. "Serrano," I said, my mind racing. "When you get here, you'll see. There is no child." "Then what? Then will you finally arrest her for filing false reports?" "If we can prove it's intentionally false, yes," he said. "But she'll just claim she was mistaken or confused. It's hard to prove intent. Just be ready, Mr. Hayes. They are coming." He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, staring out at the blizzard. Sharon wasn't just cornered anymore. She was rabid. She was using the full weight of the law, the power of a blizzard, and a disgusting lie about a helpless child to get what she wanted. This was no longer about just defending my property. This was about defending my name, my sanity, and the truth. And if she was bringing the law to my door, I decided I was going to bring the truth to the entire world. The phone call with Sergeant Serrano changed everything. This was no longer a private battle. Sharon had made it public by dragging in the sheriff's department with a vile lie. I knew I couldn't just wait for them to arrive. By the time they got here, plowing through the blizzard, Sharon would be right there with them, spinning her tale of the concerned community leader, the heroic savior. She would control the entire narrative. I had to get ahead of it. I had to show the world what was really happening on Black Pine Ridge in real time. My grandpa used to say, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." It was time to flip on the floodlights. I grabbed my laptop and set it on the table in front of the main picture window. I angled it to get a clear view of the porch and the driveway beyond. I launched a live streaming program, the same kind people use to stream video games. The title I typed was simple and direct: Illegal HOA Harassment and False Police Report in Progress. I posted the link to my own social media and, more importantly, I sent it in a direct message to neighbor Ben, who I knew was part of a valley-wide community watch group online. I typed a quick message: "Ben, going live. Sharon's coming with the cops on a bogus child endangerment call. Spread this." Then I went to work. Using the screen sharing function, I first brought up the county assessor's official map. With my mouse, I circled my property in bright red. Then I circled the boundary of the Black Pine Estates HOA, a good 100 yards away. For anyone watching, I began, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Ethan Hayes. This is my property. As you can see from this official county map, I am not part of any HOA. Despite this, the HOA president, Sharon Vance, has been harassing me for the last 12 hours. Next, I opened the video file from 4:12 that morning. I hit play. At approximately 4 a.m., I said, narrating the footage, two individuals sent by Ms. Vance attempted to break into my home. The viewers watched in silence as the two shadowy figures appeared, as one tried to pry open my window. I paused the video at the exact moment the nephew's face was clearly visible. "This man is Sharon Vance's nephew," I stated flatly. "I have filed a report with the sheriff's department." In response, Ms. Vance has now called them with a false report that there is a child in danger in my home. There is no child here. It is a lie designed to force entry. I could see the viewer count starting to climb. 10, 50, 100. Ben was doing his work. People were sharing the link. Just as I finished speaking, I heard it. The unmistakable, grinding roar of a snowplow. Headlights cut through the whiteout. It was a big pickup truck with a plow on the front, scraping its way up my driveway. Behind it, just as Serrano had said, was a sheriff's SUV. And behind that, Sharon Vance's own vehicle. Red and blue lights pulsed across the pines and my porch. They were a parade of malice. They were here. As the plow pushed the last ridge of snow aside, the truck crossed the invisible line onto my property. And that's when my second line of defense kicked in. A high-pitched, piercing shriek split the air, easily cutting through the howl of the wind. It was the motion-activated siren I'd set up with the trail cams, a deafening alarm designed to scare off Berser, in this case, land sharks. The effect was immediate. The plow driver slammed on his brakes. The deputies in the SUV flinched. I cracked the door and stepped onto the porch, arms folded. Cody planted on the top step, ears up. Sharon threw her car door open, her face a mask of outrage. Cody held his post on the porch step, barking furiously, his deep, booming voice adding to the chaos. He wasn't just barking at the noise. He was tracking them. His eyes followed Sharon as she stormed out of her car, and then another man who got out of the passenger side of the plow truck, the nephew. They were hauling things from the back of Sharon's SUV, coolers, blankets, a box of supplies. They were creating a stage, props for their little play of humanitarian aid, all for the benefit of the deputies. But they didn't know about the other audience, the hundreds of people now watching them on a live stream, seeing the truth before the performance could even begin. The live stream kept rolling from the window, a wide shot on the porch and cruisers. Both deputies, Sergeant Serrano and Deputy Dawson, stepped out, faces grim and weary. Their cruiser's red and blue wash splashed the porch and pines. Cody held the top step, for glowing red-blue, eyes locked on Sharon. She was already yelling, pointing at my front door, her voice lost to the wind, but her furious gestures clear as day. The stage was set. The actors were in place. It was time for the final showdown on my porch. Gray daylight over fresh snow framed the standoff. The scene on my driveway was pure chaos, and my live stream was capturing every second of it. The alarm was still shrieking. Cody was still barking. She ditched the parka pink robe, hair rollers bobbing, and stormed uphill, her nephew trailing like a nervous lieutenant. Sergeant Serrano intercepted her halfway up the walk, holding up a hand. "Mrs. Vance, stay back," he ordered. Then to me, low and clear, "This is a knock and talk. No warrant, no entry." His voice cut through the noise. "Let us handle this." Deputy Dawson was right behind him, his hand hovering near his sidearm, his eyes scanning everything, looking tense and ready for trouble. This was not the simple welfare check he'd been expecting. Sharon ignored Serrano completely. "He refused me my weekend booking," she told them loud enough for the stream. "He's unstable," she screamed, pointing a finger at my front door. "He's got my nephew's boy in there," she claimed. "He wouldn't let my family in out of the cold. You have to do something." She jabbed a finger at me. He refused. "Arrest him." "It was my weekend," she screeched, jabbing at the porch. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime, playing the terrified, concerned citizen. But her nephew, the one I'd filmed trying to break in just hours earlier, made a critical mistake. Maybe he wanted to impress his aunt. Maybe he was just stupid. But while Serrano was distracted by Sharon's theatrics, the nephew saw his chance. He darted past the deputies, making a run for my front porch. He was yelling something about getting my son, a lie built on top of his aunt's bigger lie. I watched on my tablet screen, my heart pounding. This was the moment it could all go horribly wrong. He reached the door and fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small metallic object. I recognized it instantly from videos I'd seen online. It was a bump key, a tool used by locksmiths and thieves to open pin tumbler locks in seconds. He was going to try and open my door right in front of two police officers. He jammed the key into the lock. That was attempted unlawful entry, in plain view. But Deputy Dawson, for all his by-the-book stiffness, was a professional. He might have been misled by Sharon's story, but he knew a crime when he saw one being committed 3 feet in front of his face. He spun around, his movement swift and decisive. "Police, get your hands off the door," he yelled. The nephew froze, the key still in the lock. In 2 quick steps, Dawson was on him. He grabbed the nephew's arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him against the log wall of the cabin. The click of the handcuffs snapping shut was loud and final. It echoed in the sudden silence as the alarm finally timed out. Cody stopped barking. Even the wind seemed to die down for a second. Sharon's performance came to a screeching halt. Her jaw dropped. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He was just trying to help." "That's my nephew." "Your nephew, ma'am," Sergeant Serrano said, his voice cold and hard as iron, "was just caught on a live stream, viewed by half the county, attempting to burglarize an occupied dwelling in front of a police officer." Sharon's head swiveled from her cuffed nephew to the phone propped in my window, its little green light glowing, broadcasting her entire scheme to the world. The color drained from her face. Her rollers shook, voice cracked into a shriek as the cuffs flashed. She looked like a ghost. She started sputtering, a torrent of denials and excuses. "It's a misunderstanding." He thought he heard the boy crying. He was scared. He wasn't thinking clearly. It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort to salvage her story, but the damage was done. The bump key, the attempted entry, the lie about the child, it was all collapsing around her. Serrano calmly walked over to the nephew, who was now slumped against the wall in defeat. "I'm going to need to log your personal effects as evidence," he said, his voice devoid of any sympathy. He reached into the nephew's coat pocket and pulled out his cell phone. As he held it in his gloved hand, preparing to place it in an evidence bag, the screen lit up. A series of new text messages began to pop up, one after another, displayed right on the lock screen for everyone to see. And with each message, the final pieces of Sharon's crooked empire crumbled into dust. The nephew's phone screen glowed in the gray afternoon light, a beacon of truth in the middle of Sharon's web of lies. Sergeant Serrano, who had seen it all in his years on the force, just stood there for a moment, reading the notifications as they popped up. His expression went from weary to grim, and then to outright anger. Without a word, he turned the phone so that Deputy Dawson and I could see the screen through my window. The live stream camera was still rolling, capturing the whole thing. It was a group chat. The name of the group was Dunkirk Winter Stays, and Sharon Vance was the group administrator. The messages were damning. One read, "Aunt S, is the Ridge House open yet? The Millers will pay $500 for 2 nights. Another one said, "Tell Mark the key is under the fake rock by the woodpile. Owner is out of state." A third, timestamped just 20 minutes ago, was from the nephew himself, stuck on the porch. The old guy called the cops. Stick to the story about the kid. My blood ran cold. This was never about one night for her cousins. It wasn't about safety or community. It was a business and illegal, underground rental scheme. She was targeting unoccupied mountain homes, using the blizzard as cover to move in her clients, friends, and family who would pay her under the table. My cabin, because I was home, was the wrench in her whole operation. She wasn't trying to house her family out of kindness. She was trying to evict me so she could rent out my home. The coolers and blankets weren't for a humanitarian crisis. They were props for her first set of paying customers. The lie about the child wasn't just a tactic to get the cops here. It was to create a justification she could use over and over again at other properties. "Sir," I said, my voice low and amplified by the phone's microphone to the live stream audience. Scroll up. Serrano, his face like stone, swiped his thumb up the screen. The history of the chat was a detailed playbook for her entire criminal enterprise. There were lists of addresses, my own near the top, marked uncooperative, needs persuasion. There were instructions on how to jimmy windows, what to say if confronted, and how to file nuisance complaints to harass homeowners. There were even price lists: 2-bedroom cabin, no owner present, $400 per night. Occupied property, emergency duress claim, $600 per night, hazard pay. She was selling access to other people's homes. She had turned the state of emergency into her own personal gold rush. Deputy Dawson, the by-the-book cop, looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He stared from the phone to Sharon, his face a mixture of disbelief and disgust. He had been her pawn, the tool she was using to enforce her criminal racket, and he knew it. Sharon Vance finally seemed to understand that it was all over. The lies, the authority, the carefully constructed image of the powerful HOA president had all evaporated in the cold mountain air. She wasn't a community leader. She was just a common crook. She let out a strange little sound, a mix between a sob and a gasp. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered, her voice thin. "I was just trying to help people find a place. It's a service. It's conspiracy to commit burglary, wire fraud, and filing false police reports, ma'am," Serrano said, his voice flat and final. He gestured with his head toward Deputy Dawson. "Cuff her." Dawson didn't hesitate. He walked right past the nephew and went to Sharon, who had started to back away. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for filing a false report and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Sharon started to wail as the cold steel clicked around her wrists, a shrill, pathetic sound that was swallowed by the wind. Her reign of terror on Black Pine Ridge, her little kingdom built on intimidation and lies, had ended not with a bang, but with the glow of a cell phone screen and the quiet click of handcuffs. I watched as they led her and her nephew to their separate vehicles. The fake humanitarian, the Blizzard Baroness, was finally getting the emergency response she deserved. The evidence on that phone was undeniable, broadcast live for her whole community to see. The war was over. I had held the line, and I had won. The red and blue lights of the sheriff's vehicles faded down the mountain, leaving behind an almost shocking silence. The only sounds were the whisper of the wind through the pines and the steady crackle of the wood stove. I stood on my porch for a long time, just breathing in the cold, clean air. Cody came and sat beside me, leaning his heavy body against my leg, his presence a warm, comforting weight. He'd earned his steak dinner tonight. The fallout from that afternoon was swift and total. The live stream had gone viral in our small county. By the time Sharon Vance was booked downtown, everyone knew the story of the Blizzard Baroness, who tried to run an illegal rental scheme during a state of emergency. Charges included conspiracy to commit burglary, filing false reports, and wire fraud. The HOA, facing a massive lawsuit from me and, it turned out, 2 other homeowners she'd been targeting, completely imploded. The board members, including the men from the Safety and Aesthetics Committee, all resigned in disgrace. An emergency meeting was called, the one I'd been invited to and politely declined for years. This time I went. The residents, horrified by what had been done in their name, voted to dissolve the old board and rewrite the bylaws from scratch, stripping them of the kind of power that could ever be abused like that again. They even offered a formal public apology to me, which I accepted with a simple nod. I didn't need their words. I had my peace back, and that was enough. A week later, you would never know a war had been fought on my land. A fresh, deep layer of snow had fallen overnight, covering the tire tracks and footprints. making the whole world look clean and new. The mountain was quiet again. It was the kind of profound silence my grandpa had loved, the kind you can feel in your bones. Inside the cabin, a pot of chili simmered on the stove. Cody, full and happy, was snoring soundly on his favorite rug, his paws twitching as he chased dream squirrels. On the old radio I kept on the mantle, the Patriots game was on. They were down by a touchdown in the fourth quarter, but starting a promising drive. It was a familiar, comforting sound, the backdrop to a perfect winter evening. I looked around the warm, cozy room, at the log walls my grandpa had notched and set with his own 2 hands. He built this place to be a refuge, a bastion of self-reliance and peace. For a few days, it had become a battlefield. I had been tested. Someone had tried to take this place, this idea, from me through lies and intimidation. The question I'd faced was how far I would go to defend what was mine. I didn't have to resort to violence or break the law. I just had to be smarter, calmer, and more prepared. I used the truth as a weapon and technology as my shield. I held the line, and as the announcer's voice rose with excitement on the radio and Cody let out a contented sigh in his sleep, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of calm. This was my home, and it was safe. I went as far as I had to, and I knew with absolute certainty I would do it all again.